Hey friends, what is going on? My name is Kleyn Lopez. Welcome to the Information Diet. This podcast exists to help you become the absolute best version of yourself. Not an okay version of yourself, not an average version of yourself, the absolute best version that you can possibly imagine. And this episode is special because, for one, it's the first time I bring a guest in, and two, it really starts what is to be this podcast in a consistent way, right? I have an editor on board. I have a marketing strategist on board. Not that you need all those people to make it official, right? I could have definitely not done it without them. Or maybe I couldn't, right? The lack commitment when it was just myself. There's all these things pulling me in all different directions all the time. So now I have an actual team that's going to help me get this very much needed information to you guys. So thank you. I appreciate you being here. I have one favor to ask though. Okay, if you get value out of this podcast, I need you to share it with a friend. Again, I'm not a super huge team, right? I'm here in my home, and this message is important. It's gonna help you. It's gonna help your friends. But I need you to help me get that word out there. So with that said, I want to introduce the guest for this podcast. His name is Nick. So Nick is actually my friend from volleyball. I met him playing here in Southern California, and he's such an interesting guy that I always enjoy having conversations with him. But I really appreciated, locking the 2 hours and a half that it took to convey the message of what his best version of himself was, and it was definitely truly inspiring to me. And just giving you a little context on Nick, right? I go to his house, and in the garage, he's always working on like super cool projects, right? Last time he showed me how he was building the fastest electric skateboard in the world, right? He's an engineer, so he has a knack for an affinity for all those types of things. And then this time when we went to record at his house, he showed me this copper processor, how he was processing hundreds of pounds of copper through this like giant noisy machine. And it's not even that I got it, but I definitely felt his passion, and it's something that I'm taking with me, right? Like, what can be my 1, 2, or 3 projects, or in his case, he has like 6 going on for him, that I can be super passionate about. But a little bit about him: he's a consultant, engineer in the aerospace industry, so he does everything from the engineering side of materials to supply chain, and we'll be certainly talking about it, to pro product and program management for companies. So he goes on and consults them. He's a real estate investor. He's a property manager. He's a money lender. My man seems to do it all, right? And on top of that, he has like his own little project that he's working on. Probably like the coolest one for me, right? He's building the world's fastest electric skateboard. It's been in development for a while, so I'm super excited that he's wrapping that up and looking to break the Guinness World Record here coming up. And then he also is building the motherboards, I guess, because that's what he wants to do, right? He'll tell you a little bit about that in this podcast. But I hope you enjoy, friends. He's definitely someone with tons of experience, and you can see how, or he exemplifies what living the absolute best version of yourself can look like. With that said, welcome to the podcast. Hey, Nick, thanks so much for being my first guest in the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's super cool. I know I walked in here and you showed me all this cool, crazy projects that you're working on.
Things go.
Yeah, I have more than a few, I would say. I'm very curious about your mind. The purpose of this podcast is to guide people to becoming the best version of themselves. And I think they can take away something from
Everybody
someone.
take a snippet away and pack it back until you need it, and then
Well, you're a great mind to take snippets away. I come in, I go into your garage, and you have a giant machine that's processing copper. The last time I was here, you showed me what is to be the fastest skateboard.
attempt for the fastest speed on electric skateboard.
Yeah, tell me about this drone. I don't know anything about that one.
Well, yeah, that was a little side project early last year. I designed a couple of those circuit boards. My goal is ultimately to assemble as low a cost system as possible, and ideally sell it in large quantities.
So you are looking to optimize the cost
Well, right.
of
Yeah.
drone making?
Well, it was just for that particular project.
Yeah.
But the circuit boards, when you buy them off the shelf from a company or from a store, there's a big markup because they're pretty complicated. There's lots of things going on, and some of that design is proprietary.
Okay.
Designers work for hours and hours designing this thing, and then they have to prototype it, and then they have to go and test it once they get that prototype back and they can turn it on and check its functionality. All that costs money, right? It takes
Yeah.
time. That investment in time and money up front gets spread out over however many units they sell. Basically, at the end of the day, if you're looking to do something as cheaply as possible, you design it yourself. And so, sure, they're complicated, but it's not magic. Those types of, well, speed controller and receivers have been well established for decades in total. So the information's out there
Right.
on how to design it if you got a little bit of how to start. I'm not an expert by any means. Hell,
Yeah, I think you're doing pretty good. It just takes walking to your garage. And what you're talking about reminds me of the stupid index that Elon Musk talks about when he built his rocket.
what are the gradients?
So essentially, he says that the difference between the cost of raw materials
Mhm.
and the final product,
Yeah.
it's the stupid
proportional
is
to
the idiot index,
Yeah.
right? The dumber you are, the more you're gonna pay for that final product. So that's how I'm assimilating what you're talking about with the circuit boards, right? Because that's what you're talking about. It's complex stuff like that.
Yeah.
But let's say they give you a step back. What does a circuit board do, and
Oh,
why do you get into it?
printed circuit boards, right? They're common. They're phone. The TV's got a ton of them. Oh, electronic device has some type of circuit board.
Is it the logic gates for electricity?
Well, it's form with which the components are mounted that perform those functions, right? So you've got processors, voltage regulators. You can have passive devices like resistors and capacitors.
Okay.
Yeah. So all those things together perform those functions.
That
right?
the ultimate logic for electricity
Yeah,
to do the function.
Yeah. If it's a CPU, right, it's doing calculations, and all of the active components have some sort of logic capability within them.
Right.
They may be hard coded or burned into the circuitry, and you can always reprogram a processor at a computer. You
Right.
can program and tell it to do different things. All those components sit on a circuit board, depending on the item's use and its function. That dictates how those components are selected and laid out and how the whole thing works.
Why circuit?
Identified as a great balance of complexity and opportunity. And so,
Okay.
if I'm able to save $2 on a circuit board and I'm going to produce 100,000 units, I mean, that amount of money alone can pay, a couple of salaries
Right.
that could easily develop, design, and, fully support a custom design.
Right.
Now, in that case, with a little bit of assistance, from some people that really specialize in that, I was able to put the information together and design it myself. So,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, you look at it from that side of things, it could be as high as $10. And so for the speed controllers, for example, this can be well over $100 for top of the shelf specifications. Now, I wasn't going for that, but still you can see a lot of that cost goes into the overhead profit for the company that's doing it.
And what do you think is your competitive advantage here?
Well, I can control the entire supply chain from end to end.
Hmm.
I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more, but the supply chain side of things, that's what makes and breaks a lot of people's activities, especially over the past few years. It became
And I know that you're a supply chain expert in the aerospace industry. And I am very curious. You're right. Like,
Well, yeah,
I
maybe
think, how do you get into that? What do you do? Just tell me what you do, because you do so much cool stuff.
in my case, I consult for engineering, supply chain, program management, based in aerospace industry. But have branched out into a new technology battery, some industrial engineering applications, and obviously electronic components too. That's
Right.
actually through the past few years is where I got, I'm not gonna say a lifetime's worth of experience, but
I mean,
a
I can imagine.
disproportionate amount of experience to the time that elapsed.
So walk me through, how do you go from high school to being a consultant
Yeah, how do I
in one
make
of the biggest industries in the world, right?
Well, it was a long process, not very straightforward. I'd say a good part of it was getting lucky in a way. Go through the story, and you can tell me if you
Yeah,
agree or
tell me the story.
disagree.
No, I love
But
that.
I think you have to, in some sense, be lucky, but you have to seize and make the most of the opportunity that presents itself.
Okay, so what were your
Well,
turning points that let you?
I always knew I wanted to be an aerospace engineer from
How?
a very early age.
Like you're a
Very
kid playing with rockets?
Airplanes was where it started. My father's a civil engineer, so
Okay.
I got healthy engineering influence. There's a lot of similar characteristics and personality traits that him and I have. My mother, she would always, not I say always, but regularly take me to the local airport. I think that's what really inspired this in me, seeing airplanes fly around. So even when I was back recently for Christmas, Mom pulled out a book. It was an autobiography that I had written in 8th grade.
You wrote it.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
it said, I can't remember exactly, it was on the title page, but like maybe the first page, I want to be an aerospace engineer.
Okay.
And so I had the benefit of where I wanted to head
Right.
right away. And I did a lot of hands-on projects like cars. I rebuilt cars. I turbocharged. I had a Toyota 2, first generation.
Okay.
R2, and took a turbo from a Mitsubishi, a T25, and stuck that on and drove it for 6 years, actually.
Yeah. How old are you?
First car I got before I turned 16. I remember this guy down the street was selling it, and it was a Ford Contour.
Okay.
So, standard sedan, but he was selling it for a pretty good price.
Yeah.
And I saw it and I started talking to him, and I'm like, you know what? Let's do it. So, I mean, I was getting to the age where I was like getting
Yeah.
close to and ready to have a car. And I was going to borrow the parents' car. Like
Right.
I wanted my own car. And so, like I said, I paid cash and I drove it home. But when my dad got home from work, he's like, what's this in the driveway? Like, how did you get it home? Because he knew that I couldn't drive. I mean, it was only like a half mile away, so it wasn't an egregious offense. Still,
I love the confidence.
at the end of the day, I got myself my first car. So I worked on that one. I mean, didn't need, too much. It was just kind of, again, first car. Like you want something super reliable
Right.
and no frills, because statistically, you're more likely to get into an accident.
So you're writing yourself, what do you call it, letter, journal,
Autobiography.
autobiography. So, and then you already know that this is what you want to do. So then how do you pursue that?
Yeah,
Or is
so
it just college? And
I kind of built on those hands-on activities, and I built an ultralight in high school. I applied to aerospace engineering schools and went to school in Florida and Daytona Beach.
and nice. Career wise, because obviously, I don't know, maybe it wasn't your experience, but I find that college doesn't necessarily mean career success, right? There's a lot of turning points along the way.
It is what you make of it. I firmly believe that every situation is what you make of it. I mean, I took it pretty so. I was obviously going to school, but I also worked at a composite shop. I think it was a sophomore year. In recognition of internships, right? You want to get an internship because that is one of those springboard moments that can make a difference when it comes to your first real job. And so I started looking, and this was like months before the beginning of the spring semester.
Okay.
And I found this composite shop that was 15 minutes south in New Smyrna Beach. They didn't have any jobs posted, but I just sent them an email.
What does a composite shop?
Yeah, they process composite materials, right? So you commonly think of composites as fiberglass or carbon fiber and epoxy or polyester, some other resin, right? So you got the fibers and the resin, which is the glue that holds everything together.
Right.
This composite shop was contracted to do a bunch of different things. They made a bunch of different products, a boat engine, cowlings, transoms for, I was thinking, forewinds. And then they had a contract with Disney. They made tram doors. So you've got some low tech, not quick and dirty, but not like aerospace.
Okay.
And then they had some other contracts with drones, UAVs, which were future technology at the time. But
Right. How long ago was it?
this was 2007. At that point, it was the aircraft basically. But the big project they had was the prototype for composite light sport aircraft. And so they had just, started prototyping this airplane for a customer and they needed help. And so when I emailed them, they said, come on down and let's talk. and, see the shop and all that, meet the people. And, I loved what I saw. It was great. It was, I mean, sure, it wasn't the fanciest place, but they had all the basic capabilities. It was an amazing team. And
Right.
so ultimately I got hired and I started working like right.
So you're in
Yeah.
college and
Yeah. In college,
you're in,
I'm working.
intern, but then you get a
Well,
job straight away.
I was just working with this composite shop. Now I did do an internship with a bigger aerospace company for one of the summers too, but it was great because I was getting experience relevant to my degree,
Right.
getting paid, and I was having fun.
Yeah.
So
Can beat that
it
up.
was, yeah, like I said, it was a win-win-win, and that's really the experience for me, was having the combination of all those things come together and like just learning those materials and those processes, because that set me up for a whole bunch of other activities and opportunities.
So you said learning, getting paid, and having
Oh, it's,
fun.
getting experience
Oh,
relevant to the degree,
okay. Yeah.
getting
Okay.
paid and having fun. So if you're doing that every day, then you're doing pretty good.
That's pretty solid. Your career always had those three elements.
I mean, yeah, that has been, one of the objectives, right? And so sure, in certain situations, nothing's perfect, right? And you're never going to be the perfect situation, but you could do, if you play your cards right and you're, thinking about your next steps, you could do pretty close.
Right. Like a job. Do you go to consulting? And then I also want to tie it up to the supply chain. How do you learn about
Yeah,
supply
well,
chain?
I'll tell you how. Yeah, so after college, I worked with Piper Aircraft. You may have heard of them.
Yeah, I know. I have an hour worth of aerospace knowledge, and it's in the podcast. I listened to on the way here.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, they make general aviation aircraft.
Okay.
They're known for their training aircraft, of course. They're developing a business jet. So,
Okay.
yeah, right after I graduated, got a job there. And unfortunately, a year and a half after, they canceled that program. Just wasn't a great time for business, business jets in general. After, 2010, it was like 2011, 2012. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So they canceled that. But, I took my time, and to, tie it back into those three things, I really searched and evaluated different opportunities,
Okay.
for what was next for me. And so I went up to, there's a company in DC, and then there was three companies out in California. So I came out here and visited spots, one up in the Bay Area, one, well, desert, right north of Los Angeles, and then down south here. Yeah, north. I'll have to look it up, but yeah, I ultimately chose the opportunity in the desert, Virgin Galactic. So I was there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
Where in the desert?
so Antelope Valley, the high desert, north of Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah. So worked in Mojave at the Air and Spaceport.
Huh. Yeah, that's like a lot of probably secret stuff going on there.
Yeah, they definitely have had they've got a lot of activity that goes on there.
Right.
I guess back, kind of in the history of Virgin Galactic was the Ansari X Prize, which the first person to travel space twice in 2 weeks.
Okay. So how did that look like? Was it just like go back, like parachute down?
You just have to, pass the threshold into space. But, that was, one activity that happened there. There's, a lot of others, but, Virgin Galactic, right, they decided that was where they were going to establish themselves. So, yeah, I worked there for 9 years, started out on the spaceship, and then ended up going to the rocket motor side and led the teams that built and tested the rocket motors. It was an amazing opportunity, incredible opportunity. I mean, that was one of the hardest decisions that I had to make, was to leave there when I switched from rocket motors to satellites, actually.
What is the difference between a rocket motor and like a rocket engine?
Yeah, so in terms of the terminology, we call a rocket engine liquid fueled. Yeah, the liquid, the Falcon spacecraft.
Yeah, like it was a methane, oxygen.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got your fuel in your oxidizer, so kerosene, LOX, and RP1.
And the motor is what pushes that fuel into?
No, so the rocket motor is a solid state, right? So like the space shuttles, sure. So you got liquid rocket engines. They're like, what you see on the back of the space shuttle, but then you've got solid rocket motors. Engines are the ones that pump
they create the propulsion, the energy,
right?
And the motor.
Yeah, the motor is propelled, but it's like having a electric motor and a gas engine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same type of difference.
Yeah. Okay.
So without going into too much of the specifics, it's that type of difference that the propulsion system is a hybrid rocket motor.
Okay.
And so the hybrid refers to the solid fuel, but the liquid oxidizer. And so, that's where it gets
okay.
complicated.
Well, appreciate it. The technical babble definitely will go over my head. So, okay, but I'm curious about this decision that you made. So you're in Mojave with Virgin Galactic, and you have a great job. What had to happen for you to get convinced to go into satellites?
Well, so I switched from rocket motors to satellites. And so it was a combination of factors. Obviously, I'd spent a lot of time there, especially kind of being a little bit isolated up there.
Yeah.
It helps to, build camaraderie,
Right.
especially when you do, a certain group of people. So the duration of time, right? So, 9 years, I definitely progressed a lot, but, I sensed another opportunity, and I did want to be closer to the ocean.
Okay.
I sail, and so I had a sailboat in Marina Del Rey, and the girlfriend at the time was down in the San Diego area. Too.
Okay.
So,
a girlfriend always makes us move.
That had an influence, but it was a combination of factors. And like I said, that was probably the hardest decision, kind of big picture, life-changing decision that I had to make, because there was no simple answer.
Right. So on one hand, what do you have, and what was on the other hand that you chose?
Well, yeah. So I chose to.
No, yeah, but like in terms deeper than just like getting to the ocean opportunity, like what intrinsically, what do you think was driving? Or I know, I understand it was a hard decision, but why? What was on one hand, it was what the family that you had built.
The pros and the cons type thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, the group, right? It was a great group to work with, and obviously, the mission or opportunity of itself, like the space tourism aspect, right? Because that's the business model of space tourism,
Right.
Yeah. So one of the space tourists, I can't remember the name, but I think he paid like $10 million to travel on a Soyuz rocket.
So Virgin Galactic, that was their business model, space tourism?
Right. So yeah, their spaceship is carried by the White Knight carrier vehicle, and then it drops, and then the rocket motor lights, and then it flies straight up, and then it glides back down.
Okay.
So a reusable, launch vehicle goes a long way towards decreasing those recurring launch costs.
So it's interesting. My first introduction to the space tourism, or even the new space race, is obviously SpaceX and stuff like that. It seems like that was happening before that. So why do you think
so SpaceX? But that's a different activity, right? So SpaceX is in the business of orbital launch, providing orbital launch services.
Okay.
Yep. And so Virgin Galactic is suborbital. It doesn't orbit, right? So you don't put enough energy to go and circle the Earth. You just go up.
What about like Blue Orient, right? That they just took a bunch of people.
They do have some other programs with landers and similar.
Right. So is Virgin Galactic still relevant?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's still certainly an application there. I mean, we've yet to really discover what the market consists of, but I mean, I'd say that definitely on the plus side for them, others as well, is the Bitcoin appreciation, because growth of wealth, perhaps the fastest in that category in history.
Right.
And so they've got another new round of potential customers.
People that want to go into space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you do it?
Yeah. Oh, I would. Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, just before I left, they had actually announced an employee raffle, I guess you could say.
Okay.
And it was TBD on when that flight would be, but you would have an opportunity to go up. And so 100%. I mean, obviously being behind the rocket motor, I've got utmost confidence in that.
The engineers and the team and everything.
Well, right. And that's what makes, a lot of people nervous, but I would do some of the future astronaut tours for the rocket motor production, and I would bring them in and educate them about the rocket motor design, the manufacturing, the system safety. I mean, I performed those safety tests, including bursting an entire rocket. And that we did it with water. We didn't use fire, but you can hydrostatically pressure test anything as long as you close it up. And so we'd have a plug in the back and a cap on the front, and we would fill this up with water and then pressurize until it burst.
And then you get the same kind of propulsion feel too.
Well, it proves that you've got multiple times the operating pressure's safety. For example, if your air compressor, right, 120 PSI, that tank is good for probably close to 500.
Okay.
There are significant safety factors that go into the design to make sure. So obviously in aerospace, everything needs to be as light as it practically can be. And so you're trying to find that balance between the overall weight of the thing and the amount of safety that's acceptable. And so for the pressure vessels, roughly 3 times the operating pressure. And so the operating pressure of that was hundreds of PSI. And so, some of these things burst at thousands of PSI.
Who sets this safety
Yeah, so there's
standard
industry standards.
set by the government?
It's not like the FAA, but it's founded in a lot of post World War II era, military research, right? And so, the military and NASA too has really evolved the knowledge base. As slow as people talk about NASA being, you know, they have contributed untold amounts of data into standards and specifications. And so there's a lot of information
Do
that
you
they brought into existence.
do you think this decisions, because I work for the government, right? I guess my experience with decision making
Mhm.
is not that it's usually data driven. It's that it's I don't want to lose my job driven.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
people will set for example, standard not based on what the data says that material can handle, for example,
Mhm.
but rather like don't want to get fired, so I'm gonna set the bar at this level when the bar
Well,
could
no,
be
I
at
mean
this level.
it's all based on real world data and statistics and analyses where it's not practical to get data. So it's very well founded. These are specs and standards that have been demonstrated now for decades and decades.
Yeah,
And to tie it back into some of the today's activities, like with the launch service providers and SpaceX, one of the reasons that they were able to accelerate things so quickly, obviously they were extremely motivated and they removed bureaucracy, but they also had the ability to draw from a tremendous wealth of information to begin with.
right.
And so you think about AI, right, which we'll touch on a little bit later, but that exponential growth curve.
That's the question, but yeah, I am curious. If you were asked to colonize, right? It's not just travel to space now; it's colonize, spend the rest of your life there. Will you do it? Is that your adventure spirit there?
I mean, in the right situation, 10 years ago, yeah, I'd be
Okay.
there right now. But, at
Yeah.
some point, I guess, practically speaking, like are you trying to start a family?
Are you trying to start a family?
And yeah,
Yeah.
in the right.
Being in Mars is kind of
Yeah,
difficult.
it's hard to do it in space, but yeah, I mean, maybe you cohabitate. So maybe it's not a fair projection.
Yeah, you're right. Right. You can create a whole generation of humanity out there or whatever.
Clearly, that's something that will be addressed in due course. Yeah. So, satellites, right? So I, switched from the rocket motors to the satellites. And so that's what brought me, further south. And so I was in Costa Mesa for a little bit, but then, came down here to the San Diego area.
Great choice. Huh?
And so
Yeah.
to be just a few minutes away, it really makes a big difference in terms of the mindset and just
Right.
obviously being active too. I think maybe those are correlated, right? Because they talk about exercise being
Right.
healthy for the brain. Yeah.
Not talking about just the healthy decisions, and especially how do you balance your career now with, let's say, your happiness or your fulfillment?
Well, I'm definitely focused on that career, pretty heavily, and
Okay.
all activities that I've done, I've made conscious decisions to, go into them or all of the opportunities that I've worked with. But yeah, I mean, I could do better, and so yeah, I mean, obviously last year, this time, I was definitely playing a lot more volleyball.
Right.
I guess the winter is difficult with the sun going down early, but
Right.
the weekends, definitely doing full days at least.
Okay.
But I've focused on the consulting and focused heavily, and that's the thing about being self-employed is that it's not straightforward and it's not simple, and there's no free lunch, right? I mean, you got to put a lot of work in and cultivate those relationships.
Actually, I'm very curious about that myself. I have a huge entrepreneurship spirit. Uh, in the past, when I tried to start a business, I underestimated the amount of time and work it takes. I was
Yeah.
putting in the work, I just didn't have time. So how, especially here in San Diego, right, one of the most expensive cities, how do you feel about your job security?
Well, nothing's guaranteed, right? And that
Yeah.
goes across the board. And so, honestly, in direct roles, you do have certain luxuries afforded to you through that relationship. But, at the end of the day, if there's a change in the industry, if there's a change in the economy, if there's a change in business direction, right? I mean, you hear about reduction in forces all the time. So, from one side to the other, yes, you are a bit more in the direct roles, but, at the end of the day, I fell into this in a little bit of a unique way. And so
Yeah.
that's that force. Everything there is, if I didn't enjoy it, then yeah, I would be looking for
Right.
something else.
Do you have a full autonomy over?
Well, I mean, it's a relationship, right? So it's a symbiotic relationship. You're helping your clients are helping you. And so, it's, I think, a very much equal playing field, maybe even more equal than in a direct role because, for example, when I come in, I often interface with the senior management through the executives, the CEO and COO and similar, the VPs. And so, if they hire me on as a consultant, then obviously they see some value that I can bring to the table. And so, even though it's a more abrupt introduction, you're coming to them with something that is valuable to offer.
Actually, two questions. So one, what is that value to a company? Is it the engineer side of
No,
it?
it's the knowledge of how to solve whatever problem they're looking at.
Okay, so you're the problem solver in a very technical way,
I mean,
or in
both
okay,
technical business,
okay,
and supply chain. I mean, I have had incredible depth, but also a pretty incredible breadth.
okay,
And so, wide variety and some pretty nitty gritty in the trenches. I mean, I enjoy getting my hands dirty, like physically,
yeah,
And so when I was at that composite shop, me and my good friend who I got brought on were called the Epoxy Kids. I mean, I was upside down inside the airplane, right? I mean, I'm kind of built for tight spaces. So
yeah,
I was weaseling my way into wherever needed to get the composite material applied and, get it oriented and get it stuck down and get the, site closed up
yeah,
appropriately. I
yeah.
mean, I was getting all that
Yeah, you're meant
hands-on
to be an
experience.
engineer. So yeah, I'm actually more like on the theory side. Really, I
Uh,
love to figure out how things work
uh,
and solve problems in the theoretical space. Because to me, I think the gratification, like an engineer, it takes so much time to be success, right? Versus like the
yeah,
idea
I mean,
space.
it's like that design cycle. So people
Right,
talk about design cycles and, consumer goods can be weeks. Automobiles, can be years. Airplanes can be decades.
right,
And so, yeah, to work as an engineer on something that, at least in the aerospace side of things, you may not see operate like for 5 to 10 years or more,
right,
you don't always get that, let's say, end gratification.
right. So
Uh,
how do you celebrate the little wins?
well, you just, you grow to appreciate, what it is that you're developing or building. And, for me, it was visiting the hardware and spending a lot of time hands-on with the hardware. I mean, we produced dozens of rocket motors and tested them, and we would cut them up afterwards, for
Okay,
example. And so we would dissect them and look at every little infinitesimal detail and learn from it. And then, change the design, make small tweaks.
okay. So I'm hearing that like that positive feedback loop, right? That dopamine hit. You get it from examining and then just noticing, I guess, that there's room for
Well, no,
improvement.
I mean, it's more about the hands-on aspect for me.
Okay.
And
So as long as the thing is coming apart and getting, that's enough for you.
right, yeah, but obviously, that's a big part of it. That's not everything.
Right.
Solving the problems, right? Solving the challenges, and obviously, we're all operating in both the physical and the virtual space in our daily lives. And so, we create physical products, we create virtual products, and we take in physical information, we take in virtual information. I definitely, appreciate the hands-on, right? So I, do consult on manufacturing operations and activities, right materials selection, right, manufacturing methods. But, I also consult on the processes too, right? So how do you go from design to end product? How are the different departments arranged and what can you do to make things work more efficiently?
Right.
So these types of problems that I come in to solve are generally bigger problems.
How 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 do you price and structure your product, which is your consulting?
Well, it's an hourly rate. I mean, fundamentally it's an hourly rate, but sometimes I set up a flat rate agreement. And so, you know, just depends on the nature of the support that's needed they're looking to accomplish.
Can you tell me the story when you got the realization that I've achieved this level of expertise that I can add value to different sorts of scenarios?
Well, right. So
Yeah.
it ties into how I, landed in the, consulting realm to begin with. And so I was working at the satellite company and I had a real estate project out of state, actually in Ohio. And I realized that I needed to be present for the places we're doing renovations.
You were investing in it.
Yeah. So yeah, I got some rental property out there and they're being renovated. And I knew this going into it. I mean, that wasn't a surprise, but it just wasn't happening as quickly as I really needed it to. And so I made the second hard decision in my life,
Okay.
which was to quit my job. And the irony is I tried to quit the job because I thought that's what you did, but I ended up setting up a consulting agreement. And, what was, I guess, initially supposed to be 10 or 20 hours a week turned into 50 or 60. And so, that's what springboarded me.
I see.
But yeah, so I switched to doing consulting. I was overseeing.
So you were already working with the company, and you told them, "Hey, I have all this other thing getting my attention. You can use me as a consultant instead."
Well, I didn't. I mean, they brought the idea to
Okay.
me,
Okay.
and so I was prepared. I packed up my truck and I brought a box of tools, a box of kitchen stuff, and a box of bedding, and I drove across the country. And I parked myself, on site. So I was swinging a hammer. I mean, I had contractors working me as well, but I hands-on managed that project.
And this is the real estate
That's
part.
real estate. Yeah. So I was doing, some of the consulting in parallel as I was able, but then this was also a coincidence because when I was wrapping up that real estate project, you heard about the electronic component shortages through, well, yeah, 2021, 2022. Yeah. And a little bit of 2023. I was working a lot with electronic components and managing them and sourcing them. And so that's what went from, okay, there's not really, many issues to, oh my God, we can't get anything. And so, I mean, this was widespread. This was
Right.
across, you heard of automobiles being delayed because of lack of chips, right? The great chip shortage. So, that's also what, put me on a trajectory to, be able to continue to do the consulting.
So you had to figure it out for yourself for this project that you're already doing, and then that you can learn the ways there.
Well, that's what, really got me going in
Okay.
earnest. Okay. And so the reality is that anybody can go and choose to be a consultant. You're going to want to set up a business entity, whether it's a sole proprietorship or an LLC, well, S Corp, C Corp, but, probably not if you're just, uh, doing it yourself.
Right.
But then you're going to need to get clients. And so
I was going to say,
the clients are the hard thing to do.
how do you get clients, or how do they get you?
In the past few years, it's been, pretty good. Organically, I got through word of mouth. I didn't really do much outreach or sales or marketing, if you will. Everything was growing pretty organically. And so, that was great because when things, come to you or land in your lap, like the amount of time and effort and resources that it takes to go seek a client are tremendous. In the past 6 months, I've, been doing quite a bit of that. And, I'll say that, yeah, the last 6 months have been a little bit of a different time. Reconnected with several other friends and former coworkers that are doing consulting, and they also echoed, the similar type of environment.
Are you feeling anxious about it?
Well, actually, I've had a new client that just onboarded this week.
Right.
So that's a good step in the right direction.
How many clients do you need to sustain your lifestyle?
Yeah, I typically keep a handful of clients. It'll ebb and flow, but at the end of the day, right? I mean, in those types of arrangements, you're not typically going in as like a full time, person. Because if they needed somebody full time, they would just hire them direct. And so you're doing, some fractional amount of time, and so it works, right? But you've got to stay organized.
Mm, I understand these issues that you're solving are complex. How many hours, if you will, because you say you price yourself hourly, how many hours do you spend with a particular client?
Oh, it depends. It depends. So, one's close to halftime, and then, the others make up the difference. But in terms of hours a week, I mean, let's say, past few years, I was doing, as many as I could, 60, 70 plus. And so one of the benefits of working from home is actually that you're instantly productive. You're instantly productive. I mean, I would wake up sometimes 5:30 in the morning, open up computer right then and there, and be going. And so, for things that require that, like, real time support, I mean, a lot of those needs and requests were time sensitive.
How so?
A 10-cent resistor is about to hold up a multi-million-dollar satellite if we can't get these.
Mm.
And so, that's the ultimate all or nothing proposition, because if you don't have any part, right, any one of those hundreds or thousands of little parts on that circuit board, the whole thing may not be able to be built. And then that goes into a module, and that goes into a subassembly, and that goes into the satellite. And so you don't have a satellite. That little 10-cent resistor
Right.
could hold up a multi-million-dollar program.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm a maintenance management officer in the Marine Corps.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm familiar how, for us, it can be as simple as a seat belt, right? If the seat
Yeah.
belt needs to be modified for whatever
Yeah.
reason, like then the whole vehicle is deadline, the whole mission can be deadline, right?
Mhm.
I can imagine that the consequences of that are more expensive in the
Yeah.
aerospace
Right. There's
industry.
a lot on the line. You've got launch schedules, right? So SpaceX, especially for certain orbits, inclinations, and altitudes, you don't have an infinite window too. So, you may have to wait for the next launch window. I mean, obviously weather, is a factor in Florida, but that in terms of delays.
So I can imagine your supply chain is worldwide.
That's where I got obviously a lot of domestic experience, but international experience as well, mainly with Europe and Asia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you go from, hey, I'm helping this company, they need some very unique resistor or material, or even a manufacturer process. How do you talk to someone in Asia about trying to help you out?
Well, right. So, it was about specific parts or products, and through those interactions, I mean, you just develop a network, and so you start to get to know people, right? Because at the end of the day, right, we're all human, at least currently, and then, well, maybe not, but either way, we're connected.
Maybe not. Is this the a reference to the AI we'll talk
Right,
about?
yeah. I mean, you develop a relationship, and then, obviously, when they're able to help you out and provide you what you need, you're going to go back to them.
But I can imagine there's a catalog out there for
No,
every
yeah.
single exactly. So
These are businesses, right? And so it's more of a business network. Again, the off the shelf, side of it, all of the distributors ran out of stock, and so you may have to go to the third parties, right? So secondhand market. So you don't go between the manufacturer and their distributors. You go to some shop that bought too many 5 years ago and now is willing to sell them because their needs changed.
right.
And so obviously there's a lot of, surplus components that are out there. And so in that situation, there were certain businesses that built up those networks of, hey, this shop has this inventory, this shop has that inventory. And so it's a distributed group. Yeah, distributed group.
Have you heard of network theory?
In passing.
So it says it's kind of like the concept that we're all connected to whoever by like six connections at
Oh,
mass.
5 degrees of freedom or six.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Oh, yeah, you're right.
so with that said, like how many phone calls away are you from finding the part?
I mean, generally one or two.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
not too
No,
much.
so no, it's not bad. I mean, I was up sometimes middle of the night, right, speaking to Asia because the time difference. And when you need it, you need it. So yeah, it was a great realization for me, at least, for how valuable the supply chain side of things is, because as I transitioned from engineering to engineering management to program management, I naturally interfaced more and more with the business side. And to me, I think that side of things is as equally important as the technical and the engineering. I mean, I'm pretty, unbiased in terms of 50-50 split. Some people argue more, some people argue less. But for me, you can't have one without the other.
No,
And
right. That
so,
one is the life of the business side, I guess, and then the other was I mean, also the life of the business, especially in this.
Well, in terms of developing the technology, it means nothing if you can't sell it or distribute it or procure it, right?
Right.
In a timely manner. And so, a lot of, help that I provide is also about how to produce or how to create a design that is producible and can be done quickly, for example, or whatever else, you want to, whatever other constraint you want to put on. So
Which is
there's,
like for you, what the constraints I'm imagining is safety, money, and speed.
it depends on the customer, but
Okay.
the cost is always in the equation
Right.
somewhere. The lead times, everybody wants it quickly, right? Amazon.
We got used to it,
Right.
to the buy now shows
I
up 2 days
know.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, everybody wants it quickly. So that's a big part of it too. But yeah, I mean, depending on what else is going on, they may have to balance certification or something like that.
Have you ever encountered a problem you couldn't solve?
I mean, it's a brute force method of it.
Yeah, eventually
Yeah, I
it
mean,
happens.
there's a way, and obviously, I've found myself in very complex situations in my past, and at this point, if I know the answer, because nobody knows everything yet. But if I don't know the answer, I'm the first to say I don't know this, and however, I know who to call.
Right. You
So
have
I know,
the connection.
yeah. So sure, I love to absorb everything I possibly can, but for the things that are outside, I'm the first one to say, hey, I'll find out. And I know exactly who to talk to.
Right. Because I can imagine there's especially at the beginning, just so much responsibility that you're being hired to consult, and then you're like faced with a question that you might not know the answer right
Well,
away.
it is, I'll say this, it is a different, mindset, right? When you're going into that situation, for me, it's like really being hyper focused on what they are actually in need of. And so there's not as much time to go and like poke into every corner of their operation, and like you're not
Yeah.
necessarily going to canvas the whole business. You may work with one group.
Right. Okay.
You work with one group, and sure, you could be curious about how the rest of it works, but that's not your role.
That's not your
Yeah,
focus. Yeah.
you're not there. They're not paying you to go off in la la land. They want you to help them sort through this issue and be damned.
Do you have any opinion over the difference of supply chain for government versus the private sector? And I say this in the context of like I'm in the Marines, and I see that we pay a ridiculous amount of money that takes longer to get. That is
Well,
less efficient than I would say the private sector does.
yeah, to a degree, but sam.gov, right? And so they, for all major acquisitions and some minor ones, I can't remember what the threshold is, but they publish those for the public to bid on, right? And so you can submit a proposal for everything. I was actually looking up because I'm in the middle of getting a cage code and set to be able to bid on some of those opportunities.
So the government says, "Hey, this is the need," and then
Oh, every day they
yeah,
post
yeah,
hundreds and hundreds. It could be anything from road repair at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to we need 200,000 BTU diesel heaters in Minnesota. Like it can be services contracts. I saw one that was listed for, it was the soda syrup contract for, was it Guam or it was somewhere out there, but like they were soliciting hundreds of thousands of gallons, right? You could bid. I mean, you have to be qualified, right? They're not going to even take you to the next round if you're not fundamentally qualified. But, that is open for anybody to submit against.
No, I did think I heard a statistic, especially with the whole government efficiency thing, DOSH coming up. It's a rough number, but it's something along the lines of like upwards of 80% of government contracts.
Well, it's talk about efficiency. The one thing that I noticed, I mean, obviously I've been exposed to it in the past through some of the government prime contractors contracted the satellite company to do some of the missions for the government, but it's the terms and conditions and DFARS or flow downs. So the list of terms and conditions is very extensive
Okay.
for any of those agreements, right? And so it's an ironclad contract for the government, right? It's beneficial to them in a lot of ways. But there is so much that you are asserting and signing up to that it takes a real amount of time and effort from an administrative standpoint to maintain that documentation within your business. And so the businesses that do bid on those things have to cover the facilities and the overhead and general business expenses associated with maintaining those certifications and those standards.
Right.
Yeah. So ITAR registration, you have to gather a bunch of, documentation to assert and prove that you're not dealing with unauthorized entities. And just think about when you do your taxes, right? You gather up your tax return paperwork and that takes time, right? Some people spend several days.
Now, I am concerned, and I guess now we're talking a little bit more in my realm, right? Which is supporting war. Like, I know exactly what we're talking about. It takes so much to put a contract forward. If I have a need in the Marine Corps, it's a tremendous process to even draft the need into some sort of contract that then you get to see, right? And right now, I guess that, like, a very practical example of this is, right, okay, we have contract with Boeing or whatever. We have amazing $500 million aircraft. And then here we are seeing the war in Ukraine develop with little $100 drones on Amazon and explosive attached to it that have the same capability, but the cost per kill, I guess, which is
They're very resourceful.
Yeah.
They're very resourceful.
And fast. I think it's the speed of it in which they can adopt private sector technologies.
Exactly. Yes, the speed of adaptation. So in the Ukraine situation, I mean, both sides actually have developed it's like a cat and mouse game, between the offensive versus defensive measures, such as jamming. You can counter that with frequency hopping, but then you can get a wider spectrum jammer. You saw a lot of it in World War One, again in World War Two, but it's that type of back and forth. But it's crazy to see how effective, that approach as a whole, really has been. And so, you've seen that come here domestically. There's companies that have received one up in Los Angeles, close to $1 billion for unmanned systems. Another one has garnered several $100 million, maybe upwards of $500 million.
This is from the government.
Yeah, for ultimately, government programs and weaponized systems. And so I think it's a good thing that the private sector is able to participate in that way because there's a lot of, technologies that are developing from it. Obviously, nobody wants to be in a conflict situation. Yeah. But at the end of the day, right, I mean, you look at all of the technology that has come to just the general public due to research and development that has been framed at least by that.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate truth for reality, right? That warfare shapes technology that then can later turn out to be very useful for civilian application.
Yeah, I mean, the evolution of the aircraft, well, I mean, not just World War II, but that 20-year era where things got pretty complex pretty quickly. I mean, thinking about what's an analog today, I mean, small satellites in a sense, but I think AI, right? I mean, especially bridging over into physical AI.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be like going from Chat GPT to like a house helper in 20 years.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see.
I think that's feasible, right?
There's a quote, I think it's from Elon Musk actually. The only limit is physics, So,
well, right. And so from the structure side of it, I mean, that's like decades old technology. I mean, now with sensors, right? So MEMS devices or inertial measurement units or accelerometers, I mean, they're the size of a grain of sand, basically. And so you can, in theory, put those ocean sensing devices on every little appendage and get that spatial awareness. Obviously, you can get the tactile feedback through other sensors as well. And so that part of it isn't that far of a stretch of logic. Now, it's the software side and how you control everything. And that also isn't as far a stretch of logic anymore. I mean, Boston Dynamics, right, with their various robot creations have gotten an extremely far ways down the path. Like they used to advertise like the dog robot. Remember it was in like Super Bowl commercials?
Yeah. The little robot jumping on boxes and stuff like that. Yeah.
they've gone oddly quiet. The fact that they've gone quiet to me probably means that they're under government contract.
Oh, you think
So
so? Yeah.
I'm going to take, I mean, that's a strong guess.
It is terrifying. We did talk about like the pros and cons of this whole military application. Yeah, man. Like, have you seen videos of I get TikToks and stuff of like Ukrainian soldiers, Russian soldiers, like hiding from these drones? It's like terrifying.
I've seen videos.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, obviously with thermal cameras and similar, you know, you're really at a disadvantage on the ground. You're just significant disadvantage. I mean, even, you know, the trenches, right? Obviously not protected, bunkers, you know, maybe to some degree, but they don't really have a lot of, I mean, all the infrastructure has been destroyed. So there's no cover.
Right.
Yeah. They're either out in the field.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying. I can't imagine it. I was infantry for my first early on in my career.
Yeah.
There's always this sense of maybe not fairness, but like, okay, I can handle this. It's another human at the end. You know what I'm saying? There's like this confidence to it.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine how helpless it feels.
Oh, being against machines.
To be against machines now, against intelligence too. Like we're talking about AI and stuff like that. Like we're very close to that being part of warfare as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's, you know, I mean, obviously there hasn't been a major conflict, but you know, obviously, yeah, I feel if something came up, then there's technology ready.
I don't imagine you are a technophobe, but is there any areas where technology, where you wish it was slower?
It's like a law of physics. I mean, the knowledge is going to progress. And so, I mean, ultimately to survive as a species, we've got to figure out how to go somewhere else. And, you know, we've got time, but we don't have infinite resources.
Right.
You know, and so, I mean, well, let's see, Men in Black, right? The space bug that just like goes, the giant cockroach that just goes eating everything and then spreading, right? I mean, are we going to be that? The jury's still out, but
are you a speciesist, meaning that like you think that the human race is the one species that should carry forward?
Oh, I don't know about the one, but you know, at the end of the day, if it's not us, then it's somebody else. And so, you know, to that point, like I'm always going to vote for us.
For us, right? Yeah, we have that huge bias for a reason. Do you think consciousness will evolve with the evolution of AI?
Oh, right. Yeah. I think it's inevitable. You know, how does it manifest? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, just going up that thought curve, like the self-awareness that's in terms of processing power, right? It's just,
yeah, I was going to say that.
When you've got almost infinite processing power, I mean, that's more processing power than our brain does. And so if our brain's conscious, then certainly that would be considered conscious.
I think I personally see consciousness in a spectrum, right? I don't think there's a moment that there's consciousness. I think it could very well be related to the amount of information that gets processed. So in that aspect, yeah, when there's a network of artificial intelligence that's processing way more information, I think we'll see the next level of consciousness.
Right, yeah. I mean, listening to Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, keynote speech for CES this year, I mean, it's very clear to me that, you know, from a processing power standpoint, you know, that growth just keeps going.
Do we humans, because obviously AI has the computing, even the perceptual advantage, computing and perceptual advantage. Do you think we have a competitive advantage as humans?
We have control over the physical world. That's our advantage.
Yeah.
I mean, we're reliant on computers for every called significant aspect of our lives. And so, you know, in a contingency situation, you just have to shut the computers off and you hope that they don't have physical means by which to go and come after you. I mean,
which seems like they do right now. I think, you know, if I was AI and I was trying to control the physical world, where it just like would be your biggest threat if you want to take dominance, if that was your goal. Or survive.
You're saying if you were the AI?
Yeah, if you're AI, well, there's two ways to control the physical world. One is through understanding human psychology so well that you control humans through it,
right.
Or just through the pure robotics.
If you happen to a host of bodies, of robot bodies somehow.
Oh, well, no, I'm thinking even like, the movie Ex Machina, where like she was able to control the physical world
Mm.
by just pure manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in a manipulation situation or scenario, like they're gonna what it's gonna be like TV, like telling us to. It's like I don't know. That's like Donald Trump telling you to buy Bitcoin. Like, all right, he's pretty influential. Maybe I'll buy a little bit, but if he says to spend your life savings on it, I'll say, yeah, no, like,
But
I'm good.
don't you think we have like I mean, we do it, it's fact, we have a ton of biases that if someone were to become an observer and both can observe multiple, just the entirety of the world,
Mhm.
but then also do the pattern recognition that comes with AI.
Mhm.
Like, don't you think they can put those two together? Like, okay, you observe, you pattern recognize, and you can tap into that human
Well, how about
bias.
this? In theory, I guess if you found a subject that was receptive, then you could breed leadership through that. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
because like
there's a will, there's a way.
yeah, because even in like dumb technology, which kind of like the Cambridge Analytica, right, where like all it took is like fitting people more information about a
Mhm.
certain politics, and then boom, they
Right.
sway politics, right?
I mean, who knows? Maybe, some of the communist countries had like a secret supercomputer telling them what to do behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, with that said,
Even then, no, even then, there's culture, right? So, you look at those situations, and there's still culture, right? The population still has an identity, right? They have traditions, and they are unique in their own way. So, you know, they're heavily influenced, even in those severe situations. They're heavily influenced by the government, but they're still not controlled win to win.
right. No. I think, yeah. In fact, there's this concept called computational reversibility,
Mhm.
meaning that you can't model reality without computing it. Like you can model the final outcome without computing the final outcome. So unless someone was able to take every single bit of information that makes up society, you cannot predict the exact future. You can model it by taking less, by
Right.
having an abstract and more compressed version of information.
Mhm.
You can create a prediction, but not perfectly.
I was trying to do that with a skateboard, actually. I was thinking about how I could simulate how it's going to move based on the controls.
Yeah, let's talk about your skateboard. So, what sparked this idea?
It was a whim.
What is it, and what
It,
sparked the
it,
idea?
it was a whim. So I designed and built and I've tested the skate that I hope to break the speed or break the record for fastest speed on an electric skateboard on
Okay.
hopefully this year. We'll see.
What's your parameter? Like faster speed? Because like I can imagine you can attach a skateboard to a rocket and it'll be the fastest skateboard,
Electric skateboard.
fastest electric
Yeah.
skateboard.
So the rules. So get us specify some rules, basic rules around each attempt, and so essentially it has to look like a skateboard, right? It can't be some crazy concoction that has a chair, um, and it can't be like wide as a car. It's got to be a skateboard.
Okay.
And so they will judge it and assert. And obviously, we're going to be reasonable here because we're putting in real time and effort and money into building the device to break this record and the time to go and break this record. So, there's records maybe that people do as jokes, but
But it was a whim. I get that, but no, it's a skateboard. Like, are you into skateboarding? Or what? What?
yeah, I mean, connection with longboards.
Okay.
I had a friend that, he had an electric skateboard. And so that kind of got the wheels turning. And, it was something that I felt like I knew I could do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely complicated. And it's been, well, 5 years since I started the project. And there's been, downtime in
So
between, but
where are you now in the? Because I know you already tested it, took a fall for it, even and stuff like that. So where are we from where you started to where you are to where
yeah,
you need
well,
to be?
I'm hopefully in the final stretches. I'm going to be doing some unmanned testing of the new systems that I installed to help the controllability. And so, if all's good there, then I'll put together the package and I may solicit some partnership, if you will, with Red Bull and Monster, some of the bigger names. But then I'll ultimately head up to Mojave
Right.
and try the attempt there. So I've got a whole, a PD plan or a safety plan that goes along with it too.
Are you using the same facilities where you started, like in
Yeah,
the Virgin
yeah.
Galactic?
So
Okay.
that's the reason why it also helped that I was working in the airport because I ran the test site, one of the test sites out there. I knew the people that operated the airport. And so, through some goodwill, they closed down one of the taxiways for me. They had the fire rescue, come out. And so this was, totally safe and sanctioned.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got the taxiway for a few hours to do practice runs and did that twice. And so, man, to like actually be afforded that ability to go and, do the real practice, because I'm going to need in total, I'd like a mile. I would like a mile.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much do they offer, or how much do they have?
Oh, their main runway is it's one of the longest runways around. It's 2.25 miles. I think.
Okay. So you got plenty of space to play there.
Yeah. Now I wouldn't necessarily have them shut down the main runway because they obviously have air traffic and similar.
And now, okay. So your friend had an electric skateboard. Where does you can do it, but where does the drive to be like, no, it will be the fastest skateboard in the world?
Well, that's the point of doing it is to get the win.
That would be the win. Where's this ambition coming from?
I mean, if I'm going to go into something like that, like being the first to do something,
Yeah.
it's a challenge, right? And so you've got to design, and I designed this system myself.
Yeah, it's really good. It's functional.
I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see, how this thing performs out there. But, it's that challenge and, just testing the limits of your engineering and your building skills. So I built that everything I made myself.
Right.
I mean, sure, I bought the motors, but the wheels, I made the wheels.
Right. No, it's crazy.
Yeah, I made a tool. I took the hub, I put the uncured rubber around it. It was a press tool. And so I cranked down the screws and it had some springs in there to keep a constant pressure. It had like a closed cavity. I threw it in the oven and cured it. And 2 hours later, I've got a wheel. One of the previous record holders, his wheels exploded as he went over the finish line. He still got the record at the time. But yeah, the wheel exploded and he skidded across. Now, they were using probably cast urethane, which, that's the type of wheel that you see on your typical skateboard. But those wheels, and those are big wheels, relatively big wheels, they're going to be doing probably close to 7,000 RPM. Yeah. So yeah, I'll be doing about 7,000 RPM.
So right now you have the power to beat the record and you just focus in the direction.
Yeah. So in total, it's got about 20 horsepower.
So, okay. So you got 20 horsepower. That's going to beat the record, which is?
Currently it's 83 miles an hour, I think.
Okay.
So it was in the 60s and then somebody more recently broke it. But yeah, that can go faster than that. I won't disclose it that fast.
Okay, perfect. That's fine.
It can go quite a bit faster than that, which is exciting. Now, some of one of the previous record holders, the company, like there was a skateboard company that, kind of was putting their name on it. I think they were ultimately trying to sell production boards. For me, there's no commercialization plan. This is just this is one purpose, right? So, the cast urethane wheels, right? That's like a production wheel. And so they could say, I don't think this was their plan necessarily, but I'm sure they, in theory, you could say, oh, well, you can get the fastest skateboard in the world. Like you can buy this thing. Either way, I'm under no illusion that is anything but, a purpose-built device. It's just like race cars. If you've ever been up close and personal with a race car, there are zero creature comforts. Okay. Absolutely zero creature comforts. And they're, bumpy. There's, no plush, no cushion.
No AC, no heat, nothing.
Absolutely nothing, right? But it's pure and it's raw.
Right.
And it does the job and it does it really well. And so in school in Daytona, we were right across the street from this speedway. So for me, NASCAR, not so much, but the Rolex series.
Okay.
There's a 24-hour race every year and camp out in the infield. And so you camp there for the weekend and the race goes from Saturday to Sunday and it's a good time. But, I'd always get the pit passes and go up to, see the pits and see the cars. And, it's a long enough race that cars do break down. And so you would, see them work on the cars,
right?
Tear parts out, replace.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to see.
People rebuilt cars like the whole car basically in a couple hours.
It's a lot of respect. In general, I admire people that take everything to the absolute best that it could be. That's kind of like my whole thing. It doesn't matter if I'm not into cars or basketball, whatever. I always admire that high peak level performance, right?
Yeah.
So in engineering, I can see how this looks, and I can fulfill that. Like, okay, this is
Well,
the
right.
best
And
I
so
could be at
that's,
engineering.
that's what my vision was from the beginning. And, I wanted to build something that could go really fast.
Yeah,
And, a bike, right? I mean, I thought about it and I considered a bike, but I mean, eventually that turns into a motorcycle and then you're going 200 miles an hour. And like, I don't want to go 200 miles an hour.
right. Do you envision yourself
Well,
riding the finish line?
So 5 years ago, yeah, I mean, I was riding it, but at this point right now, no, I probably would enlist or engage or solicit maybe from the downhill racing scene because they go really fast downhill racing.
Right.
Actually, I think somebody has gone faster downhill than on a powered skateboard.
Really?
Apparently.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's like 90 miles an hour or something, but like, I mean, it's doable, but especially here in Southern California, right? Tony Hawk, Bob
Right.
Quist, got who else from Carlsbad?
Right. Now, I'm sure there's no absence of takers that want to be the one to ride the fastest skateboard in the world, right? So,
Yeah. Now, not that those guys have been around it, but nonetheless,
There's-
there's still a big skateboard culture.
Right.
And early on, I reached out to several companies to potentially partner with on the design of the trucks.
actually, that's my next question. So, in terms of, obviously, I'm familiar with a regular longboard, skateboard. You control direction by just slight left,
Leaning.
slight right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one, you lean. You
You do
as
lean
well.
too.
So the truck, right, is the thing that holds the wheels.
Right.
And in the back, there's the motor. So it's a direct drive. So there's no trucks there. But in the front, there is just the right amount of controllability. And so that was one of my challenges, was figuring out the balance between controllability and stability. Because going down the runway at 80 something miles an hour, you don't want the thing to start shaking.
Right.
Yep. And so that's a very rigid system. And yeah, I mean, I ultimately designed that.
So put me in your engineer brain when you're like, I'm going to build the fastest skateboard in the world. How do you start addressing that project and the problem solving
Okay.
that
Yeah,
comes
I
with?
actually refreshed myself. I was reminiscing. I was pulling up one of the old computers and was looking for some old files, and I came across that like initial concept. And the way I did it was, okay, how fast do I want to go? Okay, how much power do I need? And then, okay, what kind of motors can I get that produce that much power? What are the size of those motors? Can I get one that's small enough that I can actually use it as a direct drive, skateboard? Because I don't want to do a gear train or belt drive, or I don't want additional complexity. So, what's a suitably sized direct drive motor? And then, from there, where can I get some speed controllers? How many batteries do I need? It's almost formulaic.
Okay, but like the first question is a very important question, right? Like, how fast do I want to go? Okay, so there's a world record. You can certainly pick that number,
I don't.
or you can pick, okay, you double it, and that double is just like, okay, like,
I mean, it's in past experiences where, especially in these types of never been done before environments, you're going to plan and size everything to be much more capable than it may actually need to be. Because, I guess it was an exercise in systems engineering at the end of the day. And so you've got a motor that can only handle so many amps. You can change the voltage input, but you're going to be limited on diameter. You're going to be limited on battery form factor. You can get lots of capacity, but yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple system ultimately, but you've got to make sure that you've got extra margin just in case something that you predict doesn't work out, which is very often the case.
right.
I mean, that's the reality.
And engineering is, again, the process of correcting something is so much longer than like code, right? Like,
Well, yeah,
you can change the line of code. Yeah.
right. So if I chose the wrong motors, like, I mean, I've got to go find other motors. I've got to buy them. I mean, there's all sorts of custom parts. So I have to redesign how the motor fits in with the rest of the structure. And yeah, and it's also costs a lot of money to
Right.
get new machine parts. I mean, those motors each were, pretty expensive. They're like, we saw them, they're large motors.
Yeah. Your skateboard, what's the the price tag on it right now?
Oh, the total. I mean, well, the parts on it, several $1,000s, but I built all of the deck and the structure myself. So there's not really dollars, there's hours. I mean, I spent about a month, pretty consistently 20, 30 hours a week. So yeah, 100 something hours
Yeah.
at least. Well, I guess with the testing, no, it's probably several hundred hours.
I have like the picture of like Tony Stark, and I very much embody you being that, you know, just person who's like, when the
Oh,
movie
yeah.
cuts to when they're working on it, and just
Yeah.
like hours upon hours.
You eventually converged on what I believe to be a capable platform to do what I need to do. Right. And so when it comes to controllability, right, the throttle, smoothing to make sure that if you jerk your thumb, you don't get thrown off the back or fall off the front, that's where having the onboard controller helps to ensure that it's going to be rideable.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's also the acceleration, right? Like I can imagine that needs to be controlled as well.
Yep. And so that's why I think I like at least, a mile to be safe. But, to accelerate, I did this calculation, I can't remember, but I basically accelerate over 15 seconds from 0 to 80 something miles an hour. So 5+ miles an hour per second,
Right.
which is not a significant G-force, right? So it's enough that you can brace yourself. It's enough that you can take a strong posture or a strong stance and, really make sure that as the wind speeds get higher and higher, you're not buffeted, off in a certain direction. So, that's one concern, obviously, is the winds, destabilizing the rider. But also, I mean, the runways are very consistent, but there could be slight variations. More likely, there's slight variations in the in the skateboard itself,
Okay.
right? I mean, each motor, even if it's fed the same input signal, there could be physical differences and a little bit more drag or friction on one of the motors. And so the RPM may be close, right? I mean, even if the RPM was within 1%,
Right.
then, that can be a big change in direction over enough time.
Can you test for it before?
Well, no, I mean, that's where having the ability to control your direction,
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're having the actual.
Having just a little bit of controllability to adjust for any of those unknowns, right? They're
Right.
unknowns that you can't really characterize.
Now,
It's not practical.
in terms of efficiency, for example, I was looking up about the SpaceX engine and how it's 99.9 efficient, right? It's to the limits of what physics allows. Whereas electric power skateboards.
I mean, there's a lot of so rocket. You said rocket engines. Those spit out a lot of heat. Those.
No. But I'm just saying, in terms of the physics of it, it's the new ones that they're using on the Falcon 9. It's a closed engine, so essentially all the fuel is turned into energy.
Right.
Now skateboards, what it would be the equivalent? It would be like what's the loss? I guess the loss of electricity.
I don't really know offhand. I mean, batteries, motors. Oh God, I can't remember the energy into.
And it's okay. We don't even have to talk the technobabble, but do you think we're far off from being efficient, or does batteries have a long way to go still?
Now that's bugging me because I should know this. I really should know this. Whether it's like ballpark percent or 80%. God, internal combustion engines, they're got to be down around like 15 or 20.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know. So it's okay.
I mean, the thing has to run for a minute. So yes, I did energy calculations to size the batteries correctly, right? And so you've got peak current draw and you've got total power consumed. But yeah, I mean, end to end, the entire run could be up to a minute, and so they're not running at full speed for a minute, but there's a lot of energy that's pulled out of those batteries. They're big batteries, right?
Are you here to protect this record? Like if technology improves, competition improves,
that platform, right?
Okay.
I mean, that platform, it can go pretty quick. So if, for example, beat the record by a nominal amount in the near term, and then next year somebody comes back, like if they don't blow it out of the water, I could reattempt using the same setup. I don't know. I mean, am I going to get into the skateboard arms race or something?
Skateboard electric arm race.
But who knows? I mean, obviously it's like, it scratches a lot of itches in terms of it appeals to the hands-on aspect. It appeals to the cognitive aspect, right? Problem solving and engineering. It's fun, right? You get to meet some cool people and interact with, some interesting situations too. If you end up working with Guinness, or if you end up working with some of the big partners like Red Bull or Monster. Yeah. I mean, it'd be cool to develop other record breaking vehicles, like on the motorcycle side, West Coast choppers, or
Yeah.
they build custom stuff,
Yeah.
they build cool custom stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not going fast, but they were the guys to go to build cool custom stuff. And so if somebody wanted to break a record, maybe I could,
Right. Yeah, you could put your name out there. Now you can maybe
yeah.
do the bike or whatever. So
Yeah.
okay, but it does lead me to my next question. I walk in there. You got a freaking processor for copper.
Copper chopper.
Yeah, that was definitely a side, right? Giant machine, freaking cutting down this giant copper wires, and then you got the skateboard. There's the drone, the circuit boards. What's the commonality between all those projects that you just take on?
I don't know if there's a common theme, I mean, they're hands-on, but yeah, we're started off in their own separate ways. And, I just, not that I fell into it, but, I think it piqued my interest and I dug into it,
Okay. So something that, what I think I feel in common with you, but then when so much different, my interest gets piqued so quickly, that golden toy, and then I like to chase it.
Shiny object syndrome.
Shiny object, yeah. But I don't tend to have the follow through that you do, right? So,
well, I mean, the jury's still out. I haven't followed through, and it's been 5 years. Yeah, I started it, right? And that was actually right around the time that I switched, from the rocket motors to satellites, right? So I moved away from Mojave. It was 3 hours to get up there. Like, it's not convenient. I was 30 minutes away versus 3+ hours. Like, no, I had some other coworkers that also were like my crew.
Yeah.
So that helped. I need some other help when I do that. So it just wasn't practical. I mean, I was diving head first into another company, and it just fell by the wayside. So I recently resurrected that.
Right.
Yeah. Just a few months back, I was inspired by a friend who said, you should make it, because I was talking about controllability issues.
Right.
And so he said, you should make a remote control. And I'm like, yeah, there you go. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Because I had, I was playing with the drone stuff. And so I had all the equipment on hand, ready to go. And it's like, yes. Yeah. So now I can test out some of those control aspects in the parking lot.
So how does, because I know you have the remote control. Do you have
so it ultimately it's going to be a handheld remote, right? And so the rider, this is just for the unmanned testing. That's just for the unmanned testing.
Okay.
But for the attempt, you'll see the rider holding a typical handheld, skateboard remote. Now, it may not be like an off the shelf. I'm probably going to be doing some custom design to package it because, again, like I mentioned, if you twitch your thumb, I mean, some of these things, the throw is like, the total distance is a ½ inch, right? It's just tiny amount of throw.
Right.
And so if you think about that, the difference between 0 and 80 miles an hour is a ½ inch. Like, no, you need to have a much more, tactile feedback and forgiving device. And so, I'm probably going to be packaging the standard electronics that are the transmitter and the receiver, because it's just a relatively simple remote control link. So that's where it'll head.
How I saw the way I think about it, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, there's 3 levels input that control direction. You got the control, you got the rider's input through balancing their weight, and then
the computer, and then so the computer.
Well, the computer I think is the third one, which is that you say
so the computer does 2 things, right? Okay. So it helps to buffer the throttle, and so if you had, I don't know, for example, somebody jammed your radio signal, like it has safeties built into it, so that it can't spike, or if all of a sudden it saw like a 0 throttle input, it'll ramp down, except for there's an e-stop cutoff, which basically is like throwing the switch, which just stops it. So it'll be safe, right? And so that's the big thing is making sure that A, it's not going to keep running down the runway
Right.
uncontrolled, but also B, that if there's some, systems glitch or some radio interference, that it doesn't abruptly stop one or both wheels and throw somebody off when they're
Right.
going really fast. So if you're operating it in the normal range of motion, then it will behave as you expect. There's an emergency stop, which obviously
Yeah,
in a
for
situation
those.
you've probably fallen off.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
also, if you fall off, it'll break the link.
Okay.
And so it'll stop right away.
Yeah.
Now, just thinking through the failure modes, like if you're falling off, you're probably also letting go of the throttle too. And so there's a spring return. And so within a tenth of a second, I would say, it'll spring back to zero. And so it'll stop it from continuing to fly down.
Any resource that you wish you had for maybe this project or a future project that maybe you don't have right now?
Well, I mean, definitely when I was first digging into the speed controllers, yeah, there's a friend and a former coworker. He does consulting and he was a consultant with Virgin Galactic, and his business partner designed some badass mechatronic stuff,
Okay.
like really sweet packaging, super user friendly, but like also hardcore tech. And, it wasn't overly complicated. It was just what you needed, nothing more. There's some little embellishments, but like, they really were the epitome of what a good contractor
Mm,
is. I
yeah,
mean, they took an idea and a very basic, description, and they refined it and they turned it into reality.
that's awesome.
Super cool. But
And that contractor is the resource that you wish you had.
that's one resource that I used. I call it phone a friend.
Yeah, yeah.
There were certain things, especially with, there's some firmware, there's some customizable firmware that is loaded onto the speed controllers itself. So yes, I have that little onboard computer. I can plug it in, with a USB to my laptop, and I can upload the code and it'll go off and running. There's a much lower level software that is loaded onto the speed controllers themselves. And so that you also hook up to a computer, but it's not with the USB. It's with like a key serial data connection,
Yeah.
and you've got to give it the right handshake. And if you don't do the right commands on the command line, then it, I don't know, deletes the memory and
Shit.
bricks. Like, I mean, it's a little more forgiving than that, but it's like archaic technology in today's world, but it's the type of thing that you're going to have to deal with if you're
Yeah.
going to be doing this end to end.
Talking about dealing, especially with problems, I can only imagine, especially in engineering, that you get these problems. And I mean, you seem to, one, be resourceful, but two, have a good aspect about encountering problems. So,
I mean, the attitude is everything. And, it's sure this is for fun ultimately.
but okay, you encounter a problem, right? What are you telling yourself?
I just think, I don't know, in my mind, yes, I'm conscious of, okay, well, what's going on here, but it just kind of processes things.
Is it like, okay, there's a problem, I don't quite have a solution yet. You just like let it go and let the solution come to you,
Oh,
or
no, I
do
try to
you?
figure it out. If it's like a roadblocker, yeah, I will dwell on it as long as I need to be able to feel comfortable that at least I have a potential, solution. And, even recently with some of the software that I wrote to put those safety systems in place,
Yeah.
yeah, talk about AI. I mean, I'd use, ChatGPT to help me create the framework for it, but it's still, I mean, maybe I'm just a bad prompter. Like I said, it's several hundred lines of code now. So there's a few things going on in it. And, you can tell ChatGPT to, okay, write me a program to do X, Y, and Z. But like this is dealing with, the live inputs and some real time assessments. And so it's just a little bit more complicated than
It takes reasoning versus just predictive
right.
algorithms.
Yeah. So, and again, I mean, I'm sure that somebody that's got far more experience than I do prompting could create something at least that's close off the computer. But, I've also built this up incrementally. So I've added features. And
Yeah, yeah.
what started out was pretty simple. And yeah, my code probably isn't the most efficient. I am not, I mean, self-admittedly, I'm not great with software. I've done a few Python projects, even with GUIs.
Do you ever formally learn or you self-taught?
No, self-taught. I wrote a script to actually crawl certain pages to get prices of components, although the recent captures and things like that may have
Mm.
negated it. But, I've done some small projects. I mean, VBA, I've done some stuff. I actually made a little inventory system for the electronic component side of my business. Made a little, inventory system inside of it, including barcode scanner.
Oh, really? Cool. So when I was talking earlier, there's no massive catalog. It seems like you're getting a head start on
Well, no, yeah, those,
that.
yeah, those components are like they're at the office, but yeah, I mean, I even just little novelties. But
Yeah.
obviously, you want to be using a barcode scanner. Like that one's pretty obvious, and it's not that complicated either.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not a self-proclaimed software I'm like on the beginner.
Right.
Maybe like the other, I don't know, be on the second side of the beginner spectrum, but very rudimentary.
And I have an intuition that people that are closer to self-actualization
Hmm.
are more creative, or at least have the need for novelty or the need for mastery. I think those are
Yeah.
emergent needs once you have
Okay.
your more base needs met.
Mhm.
If we can agree on that premise, and you seem like you're very creative, but maybe I'm wrong. Is there maybe some basic needs that you suppress and you're focused on the higher level needs?
I mean, I enjoyed that. It's fun, right? So I get enjoyment out of those types of activities. I mean, I get enjoyment out of plenty of other areas of life too. But for me, it's I guess how do you define a hobby, or how do you quantify a hobby? I mean, obviously, I've got my day-to-day activities, and that is very much consuming too. But that is where I get to express a bit of that. I think the physical creativity more, because obviously I'm on the computer a lot. And it's the way it needs to be. I'm very conscious of that and fine with it. But to balance, I
Okay.
do like to get some of the hands on.
If you had full autonomy over how you spend your time, there's no financial constraints. No, it's Barbie land. You can make it whatever you want.
Mhm.
How will you spend it?
I would do the same thing, but on a boat in the either Caribbean or South Pacific. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, sure, I would probably go and travel extensively, but I'll always be working in some way, I guess, by the traditional sense. I enjoy it, and I guess yeah, money was no object, and profit wouldn't really factor in, but money attracts money, and at that point, you're going to be making money because you've
Right.
got that.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there something
You.
that you wish you had in your life right now?
Let's see, right now. Well, I mean, there's a few things for sure. I mean, as far as like family goes, I have reflected recently, and I think that obviously a lot of friends have started families, earlier on, and in some sense would be nice because I do want to have direction. But again, everything happens for reasons, and at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I don't feel at any point that I've wasted my time, or squandered my time. So from that sense, I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
But it does factor in. We talk about feedback loops. It does factor in a little bit more and more.
And to the extent where you'll be willing to sacrifice, let's say, your pursuit of
Oh yeah,
just novel things, or no?
that's going to be, yeah. I mean,
Or it's
100%, 100%.
okay,
Yep, yeah. And when you get to that point, you make that decision.
and you're willing,
Well, for a period of time, it's not indefinite.
but it's not insignificant period of time either, right?
That's probably 10 years.
Yeah.
That's it, 10 years.
That timeline doesn't scare you, like
Right. Yeah. For the first 10 years
doesn't
of
intimidate
a
you.
child's life, you're pretty heavily involved. I mean, sure, from maybe 8 and 9 onwards, you got a little bit more. But I guess at least the next checkpoint is when they can drive, right? So
Yeah. How come you don't have a dog?
yeah.
That,
So I was traveling too much.
are you
Yeah,
a cat or a dog?
there's cats outside. I like both. I like
Okay.
both. But I think for here, a cat would probably be better. I've seen some rabbits around, and I've seen a raccoon and a skunk too. So if there's a cat, hanging out, then those things are not going to be in the vicinity. So
Right.
yeah, well, I guess the rabbit's not bad, except that they eat all the ate all the pepper plants.
No, at least
Not the spicy ones.
at least the avocado survived.
Okay, right.
But no, I'm just curious because usually, like, if you have this strong need to have kids, I feel like a dog is a good starting point. You know what I'm
It
saying?
is, yeah, and
A cat.
I do help friends from time to time. I don't. I mean, it's not necessarily a prerequisite. I've had animals before, but yeah, again, for here and now, and the way my schedule is, I guess, more recently, I've been, obviously I do travel up and down, but I've definitely that's year definitely been home more. But yeah, prior to that, oh my god, no, I was
Yeah. How long have you been here in California?
in 2011. Was it 2011?
Well, I guess California is
So desert for 9 years and then here for four.
okay. Is this where you're gonna settle?
Oh yeah, 100%.
San Diego, right? It
Oh,
can go wrong.
That's what's up. And the ocean, right? Being able to surf on Christmas is a good time.
Yeah, right now one of my biggest decisions that I'm kind of facing in the near future is that if I am to continue my military career, it's very likely that they relocate me. But I'm also kind of like halfway there to retirement. So it's this balancing decision between
Right. One of the neighbors, he moved in and he was a Marine, and 2 months later he got deployed to Australia.
right, and I wouldn't mind a deployment, but it's
where
more
would
like
you?
the relocation, right?
Right. Where would you like to be if you could choose?
Here, man. I love it here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you had to go somewhere else.
What are the odds? Well, my odds are Quantico, Virginia, North Carolina, Okinawa, Japan.
Okay.
So or here, but as you can imagine, this is the jewel. So
Yeah, everybody. Yeah.
so
But I mean, you definitely, you can make it happen. It's
yeah, and then
even if you come back after a period of time.
yeah. Well, the thing is that McKenna, my partner, she's staying here. Like she has a good career here. She loves it. I don't even want her to relocate with me to somewhere that she's not gonna fit in. Like. So yeah, I don't know. Anyways, big decision, but it's just hard to leave San Diego once you get here.
Right. Yeah. It seemed like they do deploy a lot of people to Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have one of my closest best friends be in Australia for a bit. I've only visited. So,
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, man. So actually, let's do this thought exercise. You die. You
wake up dead, or
yeah, I guess you consciously wake up, but you're dead, and like on the other side of you, facing you, is the absolute best version of you. Well, how is it similar to where you are? But in what ways do you think that absolute best version of you is different, or at least something that you accomplished that got you there?
I'm just trying to figure out physically, like, are they gonna like assimilate you, or is one gonna take over the other? Or
No. So I like this thought exercise.
you steal their wallet.
I think
take
you can only see like, oh wow, this is who I could have been, or I'm so glad that I am this person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say because I feel like everybody is one good decision and one bad decision away from either end of the spectrum. And so it's just part of it is the luck of the draw, and certainly you can influence. I firmly believe you can influence your path, but you've got to have the wherewithal within to stay the course.
Now, I guess I'm not. This is the absolute best version you can be given your circumstances. Not, you know what I'm saying? Like if you got dealt a shitty hand, your absolute best version is gonna look different than if you got dealt a good hand.
Well, let's explore those circumstances. Are you a self-employed contractor that also on the side day trade stocks, and you happen to get lucky on a stock play, and now you're a gajillionaire, and is that the best version of yourself?
I mean, is it money the best version of yourself?
It's a bunch of other things too, but like, is that the vision for like the foundation?
No.
Or it's everything that you could have.
Again, in this scenario, someone let's say grew up without parents in a favela in Brazil, but his best version of himself was, let's say, getting a 9-to-5 job and able to support his family and is super happy and fulfilled, plays volleyball by the beach.
Yeah.
He achieved his peak best version. Versus there's someone that, let's say, inherited a ton of wealth, has done everything that there is to be desired to do.
What would you like to be, personifying? versus what you're personifying now? I could be more chill. I'm definitely
more chill.
I could be
How
more,
so?
I mean, I get, wound up pretty tight. Obviously, having a full of clients, you got to balance a lot of priorities.
Hmm.
I mean, it's something that it would be nice and the time will come. But yeah, I mean,
Are you talking about like chill in regards to your internal pressure that you put on yourself, or the way you respond to a stressful situation under certain circumstances?
I'll talk about the response side first. I don't necessarily, won't say I don't get stressed, but like I'm able to very well manage those situations. But it's the drive and okay, it's time to go, it's time to run, and it's what really it takes a lot of energy. Honestly, it takes a lot. So
To drive or to chill?
to
Yeah,
drive,
okay.
yeah. There's a way to take a step back every once and again, but I mean, I like it. I like that. I like that the way it is. But internally, yeah, I mean, there's always internal pressure. I mean, everybody has motivation to the degree that they want to do the best they reasonably can.
How do you cope with it or reframe it, that internal pressure?
Well, I mean, you look at some big picture goals every once in a while and think through. Okay, well, where do I need to be? That sets the framework for how you can choose, right? So it's not everything, but it definitely enables you to do a lot of things. And so, for me, that's something that you need to be conscious of because at the end of the day, right, I'm running a business too. And so, businesses live and die by their financials.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel it's inordinate. It's strong. I mean, it's definitely strong. And I've always felt that way. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly given me advantages, allowed me to, take advantage of certain opportunities too.
Well, it's certainly inspiring, at least again for me, being an entrepreneur that wants to gain my autonomy back.
Hmm.
To see that it's doable, it's a perfect example. Someone close to me has their own business in California.
Right.
So,
Well, like I said, it's not easy. And going back to the beginning, the last few months, especially, have just been a little bit of a quieter time. And so, just recently, beginning of this year, things, have conversations have picked back up. And I've reflected on this and very squarely realized that my model works. I was questioning whether the model worked because it can be discouraging when you're outreaching for not just days, not just weeks, not just, well, months, not years, but you're
yeah.
outreaching for months on end and you're not getting, a lot of response back, especially when you had previously.
When do you reach out? What do you say? It's like, hey, I'm here to help. Do you guys need my help?
It's
Or
every situation's unique. So anybody that I choose to reach out to, I have researched and I have determined that there's an applicability to what I do to what they likely or are likely doing, or maybe may want to be doing soon.
right.
And
Do
so I just know those types of businesses and situations so well that I can tell just by the public information generally what stage of events they're in.
where you
If
can add
they have,
value and stuff like that.
yeah, if they have quiet projects, then sure, that's a separate thing. I may get briefed on that when the
Yeah.
time comes. But if they're just in that space, right,
Right.
then I'm probably going to be approaching them with some indication of how I can help.
Right. That's awesome. I think that can be just a tip for success in a lot of ways, like
Right.
figure out where the problem is, solve it. Okay. Question is like how do you find security?
Fundamentally insecure, but that's
Yeah.
the beauty of it. That's what's great
Okay.
is that ultimately that insecurity can work to your advantage.
How?
So yeah, I'll say, two things. The first is that because they are more transient or, call them shorter term engagements, generally speaking, you're able to command a premium because you're coming in with very specialized knowledge. It's only for a very short period of time, but you're able to command a premium for that. So it's like Mary Poppins,
Yeah.
you pop in and then you get what needs to be done and then you're out of it.
Do you have a standard rate or do you quote people
No,
differently?
it depends. It all
Yeah.
depends. Yeah. The bottom line is that I will, help anybody that I possibly can. So, sure, if there's a need for, say a cheaper resource, I'm happy to engage on that discussion and see what I can do to
Yeah.
help. And the same goes, obviously for more expensive resources. I mean, I gravitate towards more, as complicated or as tricky of a situation as possible.
Yeah.
And I, just come to the table with, hey, this is what I know I can do to help.
What is your safety net? Like, do you have maybe a number of savings in mind, or maybe someone that, or like a fallback plan to live by the beach if everything
Well,
goes bad? Like,
well,
what
obviously, I live pretty frugally, and I keep operating expenses on hand and similar. And so, yeah, I mean, the fallback would be to go to a direct job.
Okay.
And
After how many months of?
no, I mean, that's the fallback, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not a certain number of months necessarily, but it's, say there was a downtrend for a year and I couldn't get any, work that way, then, that definitely would be a case to consider. But, I also do a lot of other things with real estate and property management and,
Do you manage properties?
yeah, and some hard money lending too.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Shit, I might need to talk to you about it. I'm looking at some properties in San Antonio, Texas right now.
Okay.
So yeah, the the hard money lending might come.
Well, that one's unique, right? And so that's, it's a specific situation for specific individuals. And it's pretty cool. Actually, I really like it.
Yeah.
I love the process, and I love just the education, like learning about somebody's situation and evaluating and asking the tough questions sometimes to say, hey, like, why are you doing this? And how do I know that you're going to be able to service this loan? But I've got a mentor, one of the folks nearby. He's been doing it for over 50 years. I've connected with him, and he plugged me into the broker that he uses. And so I, ended up writing a few loans last year, and I entertain offers from time to time. But, I was talking to the broker, and I was like, why don't more people do this? Because it really has pretty favorable terms.
Yeah.
And if you're intelligent about how you screen, it is, in my opinion, very low risk. Okay. And I use the loan to value ratio to mitigate my risk. And so if, for example, a property was $100,000, if you loaned out $50,000, that'd be 50% loan to value. Now, the market could tank by half. And if they don't pay their loan, then you can still take that property back and sell it on the market,
Yeah.
for at least what is owed to you. So that's the main way that I mitigate my risks. But I also do due diligence, and I go through their backgrounds and their histories. And hard money lending isn't always, it's got a bad connotation behind it, but it's not a bad thing. A lot of a lot of developers
Yeah.
use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see why it's bad.
You go to a bank, you could get 5% interest rate, but it takes you a month to close. And that's where people like developers, they're doing deals, and they're doing deals quickly. And so they can't afford a month.
No.
I can,
Yeah.
hard money with private lending can close in 2 days,
Right.
3 days, maybe.
Right. And then another thing, like for example, where I got stuck in the loan that right now, where like the bank was like, no, well,
Yeah.
it wasn't technicality. I was like, hey, my mom, me, and my partner want to go on this loan.
Mhm.
Like the debt to income ratio is astronomical.
Yeah.
But then they were like, well,
There's
mom,
too many parties. They need to have a
well,
primary.
I was going to be the primary, but they were like, well, your mom is relocating jobs and McKenna's not married to you. I was like,
True. Okay. That's fair.
and I was like, it's just like, okay, like, sure.
Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, because they need to be able to try to push them for an addendum to indemnify her, but it's just not their standard process. So yeah, I mean, the hard money side, it's got its merits because, for example, if you went to, private money, you can get that loan. Hands down, you can get that loan. Now, your interest rate may be 10% versus 5%.
Right.
But for example, developers who are flipping a place in 6 months or 9 months' time, that total cost is not that much.
No, and at the end of the day, the interest rates and everything, it doesn't matter to the investor as long as it's cash flow positive.
Exactly.
Like, it's like if it's cash flow positive, I don't care if it's 10, 50%, like it's cash flowing to me. So like,
yeah. Now, I mean, in real estate in general, you're not gonna necessarily, if you bought it outright, yes, you made cash flow those percentages. But if you take out, if you put 20% down and you take out a 30-year or a 15-year, you're not gonna flow percent.
no, you're talking 10% with hard money, right? That's the standard, and then whatever. I mean, like 6% on
break even.
traditional.
But again, it depends on where you're at. Here in California, obviously, cash flow positive is out there.
Well, San Antonio, right now, the property I'm looking at very seriously. Like
Okay.
I'm at the verge of buying this property.
Yeah.
It's 3 units, a triplex, like across the street from the stadium in San Antonio.
Oh, shit.
So like right in downtown, it's like 285,000. 3 units. It's like
Who do
5.
you in San Antonio?
My mom. So my mom, that funniest.
That would manage the place, though.
Yeah, my mom.
She would.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that she moved for that reason. So funny enough, she was getting a divorce. And she was relocating from Seattle.
Oh no.
My brother-in-law was moving to San Antonio. I'm interested in real estate, and that created like spark.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to see what the San Antonio market is. Yeah,
It's pretty reasonable. I know that. Well, Austin especially has significantly increased in recent time. Chicago's increased in recent time.
Well, the right now, why I think San Antonio is just such a gem is that Austin is growing in tech.
Oh yeah, big time.
San Antonio and Austin are an hour away, and there's like this corridor of development of growth
that's happening in between.
Yeah, between San Antonio and Austin is like creating this like giant tech hub. So I feel like San Antonio right now is potentially what, for example, or Austin, but San Antonio by association, is what like San Francisco was in the 90s. Whereas like, like tech is growing, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like it's not quite gentrified yet, but it will be.
There's also a lot of space available.
That's why when I did my analysis, I analyzed properties because with the supply increase, you can see that the property values are decreasing, especially with the interest rates being so high.
Oh yeah, well that hurts. The interest rate hurts.
Right. So I examined the zip codes that were the most resistant to that surplus increase.
Oh yeah.
Because those are the zip codes where the tourism is there or the jobs are there.
Yeah. Right.
Like the coast of San Diego, the downtown in Seattle where Amazon is, the thing's never gonna, and in a similar way, I analyzed it by that factor.
Wow.
Anyways, but yeah, that's where I'm at. Do you have any properties?
Yeah, so here in California and then out in Ohio.
Yeah. Do you have what in Ohio? Like a multifamily? Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's the reason that I packed up and drove across the country. But I'm always thinking about the next real estate activity,
right?
And I would love to build. I mean, it's funny if you have the ability and you can draft up your own plans. You can take that to the Coastal Planning Commission and get their stamp. You can take it to, town hall. And if you've got enough know-how to create that site plan, then it's possible to get that approved. And then, from the construction standpoint, okay, pouring a slab, obviously you got to sub that out. But, the rest of it, a small, I guess a small to medium-sized house, you could build, build in a couple of years. Get subs in to help you. And, obviously hanging drywall upside down is no fun, but like, it'd be fun to do maybe for like an ADU.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to develop, I really would like to develop.
How many doors do you own here in California?
So it's just one here in California.
Okay.
But then there's 8 in
Ohio.
Yeah. But
is it up to
2,
8?
Yeah, 2 full.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to retire off of that, but it definitely helps.
It is the stepping stone that probably will lead to retirement with, once you refinance and you invest and then.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to yield, returns on par with, or better than any of the other traditional investments. Yeah. That's not factoring in the appreciation. So yeah, here in California, properties appreciate pretty significant. Out in Ohio, not so much.
Plus,
so that one was a cash flow proposition from the get-go.
And then that just, what's it like? It's a place to store wealth.
Exactly.
Without getting taxed or losing money through inflation and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, definitely, I'm banking on those places inflating.
Right.
That's what you hope for. So yeah, I mean, at some point, I could even see myself doing something different, like, property management, having a property management business. I enjoy the property management side of things.
So how many properties do you manage?
Well, I help a friend with about a half dozen
Oh,
up
wow.
in the desert. So I've got mine up in the desert, and then his as well. So it's all pretty self-contained.
Yeah.
Yes, it's nice that I use the maintenance folks and landscapers.
You're not getting phone calls, like, freaking,
I do. I get texts. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But hey, it's what it is. It's
Because
not bad.
now, I'm very interested why you chose to manage properties, because your time is so committed doing all
Well,
these things.
it's very sustainable, honestly. And so, in terms of hours per month, it's not a significant number of hours per month. Now, you look at it as a business, and you really have to be doing at minimum several dozen to be able to
To make it worth it.
well, to just break even.
Right.
And so if you have staff, then you've got to do multiples more.
What's your operating costs as a property manager? I thought this in the
Oh no, I'm
owners.
saying from a business standpoint, right? If you want to pay yourself a reasonable salary, I mean, you just multiply it out, based on if you took 8% of the monthly rent, which is kind of, standard. Places around here, like I say, it's a single family house, they rent out pretty well. All of the apartment communities, those they have their own building manager. So
Right.
they're already established.
Right.
And so somebody that's independent is not going to break into that necessarily. I mean, you could do smaller units, so like, the big 30, 40, 50 unit
Yeah.
ones. I mean, those are serious businesses. And so they've got to have somebody dedicated.
It's good to know, because I'm relocating in a year, and if you have an affinity for managing properties, then they'll go, all right, I got a friend.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, right. Yeah. So 100% now, out of state. So in Ohio, I have a property manager.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can't reasonably accommodate doing 8 units out of state. Like, no, that's not how it works. So yeah, I interviewed a ton of property managers, chose one that I really appreciated. It was a family business, a husband and wife team, and they had several associates with them.
Just my specific example, but how long does it take to rent out a 3-bedroom?
Oh, not long. No, not long. I mean, if it takes you in that area a month, then I mean, that's a long time. You could probably get
Okay.
For me, my approach is I don't want to squeeze every last dollar. I mean, I'll charge market rent, but I'm not going to go to that upper tier and try to extract everything. I'd rather, have people be comfortable and have them, be respectful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've had a few situations, as most people, eventually will encounter. Yeah, just have them be comfortable with the situation. And so that's going to lead to longevity. And it's just going to mean, it's like the cost of acquiring a new customer versus the cost of keeping a current customer. It's way cheaper to keep the current customers.
Now, again, you live such a full life, but I can see that you're not phased by how much all these little side things that you're doing are consuming. Are you capped, or do you feel like you have more in
More
you?
bandwidth. I'm about to get busier. Well, optimistic that I'll be taking on some other opportunities here soon. So, careful what you wish for. And, like I said, the last, 6 months, I've been doing a lot of outreach, and just for whatever reason, things seem to be
Hmm.
manifesting at one point in time.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't, it's always tough because I want to help everybody. That's not a hard and fast. But if the situation doesn't accommodate me potentially having some help,
Yeah.
then it's going to be tough, because I would love to have some additional help. I'd love to have, I really would love to mentor somebody that's, early career, or, has had a job or two and wants to be able to get some more diversity in their experience. And
Yeah.
obviously, like I said, I touched a lot of different industries. And so, yeah, I think that, for the right individual, it could be a great opportunity. Yeah.
Right. I think you laid it out well, in terms of like all the cool stuff that you're into, the huge benefits, both financially and in terms of autonomy. But then you also made it very clear just that it's a ton of work, right? So
Yeah,
so
you don't get to turn the computer off at 5 p.m. Like,
Right. So,
it's always on.
so I do hope you find your ambitious person maybe through this podcast.
Like I said, I always be doing something. And so whether it's, I'd love to grow the hard money lending side of things, but the tough part is it requires a lot of capital. It requires a lot of capital. And, I've actually talked to the broker. He's got a lot of friends and being in that business, associates that have started their own funds, actually. So
Right.
it's a registered legal entity. It has a charter. It has, bylaws, all the rules of operation. And so, just depending on the fund's objectives and how it operates, you could take in and solicit investors' money and you could manage it. There's ones that are like registered with the SEC or Securities Exchange Commission. There's others that fall under certain criteria that aren't.
Is this the term syndicate?
No, well, syndicate is, it's a relevant term. It can range from being described as an investment group to, it's actually really an LLC.
Okay.
So there's, members in the LLC. That's one of the common ways to do it is you buy into the LLC. But, with as little as 5 million under management, then that begins to make it worth it. And so you're ultimately playing a bit of a salesman's role in terms of advertising your product. And, there's a lot of products out there that will provide a good, reasonable rate of return with decent safety.
Right.
It's not extreme risk. And so, the hard money lending, for example, I feel that is very, comfortable risk.
Right.
So if you as the manager are working the back end to keep the pipeline of new loans and new opportunities filled, and then you take like 1% or something, right? You take a nominal percentage of that transaction, then, that's how this works with, all of the pension funds,
Right.
401ks, right? There's a money manager that, for those funds, they're hundreds of billions of dollars. And so it's like, 0.1%.
For hard money lending, what's how fast are you expecting to get that money back?
So typically the hard money loans are interest only or balloon payments. And so monthly, the debtor will just pay the interest. So the principal becomes due at the end of the term, which is often about 2 years.
Okay. So it's a
2-year term, interest only or balloon payment.
okay.
Yeah. So that, that's just typical. Some people enact a prepayment penalty because, again, if you're just taking a loan out on $100,000 at 10%, and you're going to just keep it for a month, that's like $100.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's almost not even worth your time.
It's like not even worth it. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, you having a prepayment penalty,
Well, first of all, I learned so much about you. Like,
did I say $100?
I mean, I don't know. You did say $100, but I don't know the math. Oh, yeah. I'm so happy to have you as a friend. I got so much knowledge. I learned so much about you too. The things I didn't know. And we have a lot of similar interests.
Yeah, commonality.
So, I'll let you have kind of parting thoughts. If there was a person watching, let's say they're kind of new to life, or at least trying to get a new perspective in it. They want to become the absolute best version of themselves. What do you tell them?
Yeah, you gotta, believe in something and then trust in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that can vary pretty wide, but generally people have affinities, right, at a minimum. And so, just encourage you to listen to that and realize what it is that makes you happy.
And just pursue that.
Right. I mean, you could definitely, have diverse interests, but just keep those things around you that bring you joy.
Sweet, man. Yeah, I think that's a great advice. We need to reflect more on what brings us joy and then do that.
Right. Absolutely.
So, man, again, thank you. I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
My first guest, and I learned so much that I'm definitely inspired by you, but then to also keep doing it.